Now that we have our interior carved out, let's hide the red builder brush. And to speed up the workflow of using brushes inside UDK, we're going to begin duplicating brushes and then rebuilding our geometry to see the updates. So we need to carve out windows and a doorway for this simple room. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the brush, the subtractive brush we already created for interior. We're going to duplicate it and we're going to reposition and use the geometry tool option and resize some of the vertices. So let's go into the top view and we can select our brush. We can also select our wireframe brushes inside the perspective by going into the wireframe mode. And if you need to select a brush while having the lit mode on, if you press Ctrl Shift left click, this will also select the brush. If you don't press Ctrl Shift left click and simply left click, this will select the face. This is good for texturing and selecting materials on your BSP geometry, but to select the brushes and the brush wireframe, you need to hold down Ctrl Shift left click. So let's go into the top view and let's select our subtractive brush. We're going to hold down Alt and drag. This will duplicate the brush. So now we have two subtractive brushes. Again, we know that subtractive brush works only if you subtract it from something. So right now this is floating in space, so what we need to do is we need to resize it and then position it right in here and to carve out windows. So let's go up to the geometry tool mode and let's make it 16 units thick. So let's bring it in right in here. Now let's position it right along in here. And then we're going to use the geometry tool mode again, grab these two vertices and scale them in to something like this, maybe a little wider. And then we're going to just position where the window is going to be. Then we're going to go into the front view. And the way I'm switching between viewports is, again, I'm holding down Alt X. And with each viewport highlighted, we will toggle maximized and back to 4 views inside UDK by holding down Alt X. So let's go into the front view and let's select, and we need to just bring these vertices down a bit and bring this up a bit. So let's let's position our human reference scale inside the building so we get to see how tall this window is and how far the character will come up to it. So actually let's go inside the building first and let's insert another reference scale. Let's just drag this right in here, and if we navigate and move this up, we can kind of walk up to it and just see how large this room is. And by going to the front view, let's drag it over here and let's move this window a little bit down. As we have been resizing the brushes, you may notice that your pivot point for the brush has been offset. That's because we've duplicated the brushes and moved the vertices to resize the brush. This offers a quicker workflow in terms of duplicating and updating your geometry, but this does offset your pivot point. And the way to center back the pivot point on the brush, what we need to do is simply right click on the vertice of the selected brush and then right click on the wireframe. You go to pivot, save pivot to pre-pivot. So now if we select the brush, we have our pivot saved where we selected and recentered our pivot point. So let's go into the perspective viewport and build our geometry to see the updates. And here we have our window. So if we go inside, here's what we have. So next, what I'm going to do is just simply duplicate a couple of these windows. And first I'm going to resize it to make it a little bit smaller. Something like this. Move this up. And then I'm going to simply take this window and then hold down Alt, drag once, and then do it again for this side. One more. And one more. And let's bring this a little bit closer together so we have some symmetry along these brushes. So we have 4 grid units here. So we're going to bring this together and let's move this across here so we have some entryway where we can carve the doorway out. And then we're going to duplicate it again, Alt, drag, and we're going to resize this brush. This will give us the door that we want. And if we take this character, drag it over here so we can see how tall the doorway needs to be. Let's drag this down and let's make it a little bit wider on each side. If you want to select multiple vertices without clicking and then clicking again to select multiple vertices, we can simply hold down Alt, Control, and then left click drag, and you'll have a marquee selection. This offers a better way to select your vertices. To select multiple vertices and add to that selection, by selecting one set of vertices, hold down Control and then left clicking, this will add to a selection. So now let's go to the perspective viewport, let's close our geometry tool and let's build. So now we have some windows and we have a doorway. And then the last part, let's have some kind of an opening on top. So when we insert our light, our sunlight, we'll have some nice shadows and some interesting lighting going on. We're going to extend the top of the roof a little bit, so we're going to duplicate an additive brush. So again, hold down Control, Shift, left click will allow us to select the brush inside the perspective viewport. Hold it down Alt, drag, we can duplicate that brush, and by going to the geometry tool mode, we'll use a little different function. We can actually, in the perspective viewport, left click and select the entire face and move it down instead of selecting the vertices. So this gives us a little more control of how we will select our and reposition our brushes. So let's just drag some of these areas in. Drag this in and we'll do it on the other side as well. So we have something like this. We can also go and make sure it's lined up if we need to into the top view. So let's position it right in here, and then we're going to take our subtractive brush and we're going to duplicate that and move it on top so it carves the upper section out. So hold down Alt, drag, and we're going to resize by selecting multiple vertices. Hold down Control, left click to add to a selection, and we are going to make sure that this subtractive brush lines up with the other subtractive brush to have both of these sections cut out. So let's select, bring this in, and if we go into the top view, we need to reposition some of these vertices. And let's bring this in once, and on the other side as well. So now if we go into the perspective viewport so we can see what's going on, and let's rebuild geometry. We have a little upper section going, and then let's insert a couple of windows by using the windows we already created by simply then resizing them. So let's select one of these, hold down Alt, drag. As you can see, this workflow works really fast when you begin to duplicate brushes and resizing them, and then just updating geometry. This allows you to really quickly block in your environment and test for scale, test for dimension and how the overall feeling of the environment is without having to go into the 3D application and export, import, and try to work with two things at once. So by blocking in this with brushes, this really gives you a quick way to update your geometry and see if the environment is what you're looking for in terms of scale, in terms of how it feels, how it looks, in terms of dimension. So here we have a little longer window, and let's take this. We need to position these three brushes and make sure we have them positioned right in here, and let's duplicate them and put them on the other side. So now if we go to perspective viewport and we build geometry, here we have a couple of windows up on top and a few windows down here. So here we have our basic room blocked in using nothing but additive and subtractive brushes. We have placed human scale references to see how large this environment is. We can kind of go up, and from the point of view of the player we can kind of see how large this building is, and we also have this character for the interior. And if we go to his point of view right in here, we can kind of take a look at how large the doorway and the interior is. Now for our last part, we're going to add some stairs and quickly jump inside the game and see how this looks from the point of view of the player running inside the actual environment. So before we move on, we need to make sure we save. So go up to File, Save As. I have a folder created, Simple Room, and then in here I'm going to just name my file Simple Room 01 and click Save. So now let's add a set of stairs, and we're going to use the brushes. Here on the left hand side we have linear staircase. You can also use curved staircase, or spiral. I'm just gonna keep this very simple. When you blacken in geometry, you don't want to get too crazy with the type of geometry created. The more simple you keep this, the better. We will detail most of this environment by using static meshes, but the blackening process with BSP brushes, keep them very simple and primitive. So by left clicking on the linear staircase, we have a bunch of options come up. So first let's go to our builder brush and then click B to make it show up. And then if we left click, this will update to the stairs. So let's drag our builder brush down to where it lines up. And let's go into the orthographic viewports to make sure that we line up and we know where the actual stairs are. Our ground plane for the interior is right here, aligns with the character, so we need to have the stairs a little bit less. And let's bring back our properties for the staircase. We have various options we can set. So number of stairs, let's set this to 6. And we reset our stairs. So let's bring it back down, see if that lines up. And we need to have it set to 5. 5 stairs lines up perfectly. We have the stairs lining up very nicely. So now what we need to do, make sure that it's lining up to the ground plane, and it is. So let's close this and press Ctrl A to add the stairs. Click B to hide the builder brush. So here we have a set of stairs that we can go up inside the building. So now let's quickly test and see how large this environment is and if it's up to par to the scale and dimension that we set.